Dudes and dudettes, how are you guys? This is Chazzy and welcome to a video that I have been sitting on for quite a while. I have had this idea for so long now, I can't even remember. I've just been putting it off, procrastinating here and there, and now today it's finally out here, for you guys to see. In case you guys don't know, I am a horror aficionado. I love pretty much anything having to do with horror culture, like a cinema, television, kind of the same movies, TV shows, but anyway, anything revolving around horror in the entertainment industry, so also games and books and things like that. I am still starting to get into horror games. It's because the concept of horror movies and horror games are a little bit different. I've always considered games to be much more interactive, so it scares me a lot more, but still, I'm starting to get into it. I like horror related content, and today I'm going to be talking about who I consider to be the 4 biggest horror villains in all of cinematic history. We have got, as the thumbnail may have already given away, Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise, Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise, Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Now, there are a few other horror characters, within the mythology that do deserve a mention. We have Pinhead from the Hellraiser series, we have Ghostface from the Scream franchise, we have the more recent Jigsaw from Saw, but they're a little bit more modern, they're kind of like, there's also the Babyface doll from that movie that I forgot. We have a few very interesting horror villains, I think one of the most famous is Pennywise, the clown from It, but I still wanted to focus on these 4 because they, to me, are the pioneers of this genre, and some of them have been around since the 70s, like Myers, so they are very, very iconic, they are very historic, and they, in my opinion, they are the biggest 4. They are the best ones, in what they do, and they kind of, they brought into cinema the slasher genre, and made it the thing that it is today. I'm not a big fan of slasher because I don't like anything that's too violent and gory, but I still obviously respect these characters and I actually admire them quite a lot individually. And what I'm gonna do today is talk a little bit about them, and try to give you guys what I consider to be an analysis of which one is better, not exactly pitting them against each other, but just trying to tell you a little bit about them, analyzing each of their abilities and their their repertoire, let's say, in cinematic history, and trying to kind of determine for myself, which one of them is the best. And so this is going to be very opinionated. I'm going to give you guys information about each character and which ones I consider their pros and their cons, their strengths, their weaknesses, and I'm just gonna kind of like ramble on and see at the end who's gonna take the crown. Okay, so first let's talk about my main man, Michael Myers. Michael Myers is without a doubt my favorite horror villain, just character in general, because, he is a villain, but at the same time, depending on how you see him, he can actually be an anti-hero of sorts, because he's a bad guy because he goes around killing people indiscriminately with a knife, but he, at the very core, is a child who was abused, depending on which origin story you follow, but he had a pretty rough upbringing, he killed his sister when he was really young. So he always had something in his head that wasn't right, Now there are a few movies that kind of retcon everything that happened before and try to establish a whole new mythology for the character, and it's weird because the original Halloween movie back in 78, I believe, it was established that Michael Myers, simply for no reason at all, without any kind of provocation, picked up a knife and killed his sister, and then he was put in a mental asylum, and then he actually grew up there, and then several years later on Halloween night he escapes and goes on a killing spree, Now that is the plot of the original movie. There have been a few sequels after that, and it had already established Michael Myers as kind of like a walking tank, an unbeatable killing machine, and the sequels were a little strange, they weren't exactly very, they didn't do too well, at least in my opinion, but they were good movies. But you guys have to take into consideration that back in the 70s and 80s, it was normal for movies, especially in the horror genre, to have countless sequels that made no sense at all whatsoever. It started to get really stale, but that was just how it was really hard for somebody to release one movie in Hollywood and just leave it that way. There had to be way too many sequels. But anyway, then later we had Halloween H2O, which kind of retconned everything that happened before and went forward 20 years after the original movie. It's been a long time since I've seen that one, so I don't remember too much about what happened, but the point is that Michael Myers, throughout his time in cinema, has always been established as the literal boogeyman. He is the stuff of nightmares. He is what you see in your worst nightmares, and then when he manifests himself in real life, he is a remorseless, emotionless, speechless killing machine, Because Michael Myers, you see, he is a human being. He can talk, but he chooses not to. For some reason, he chooses to remain in utter silence while he does his killing, you know? Now, the thing that I most admire about Michael Myers, and guys, this is a fictional character we're talking about, so don't think that it's me admiring somebody who goes around killing people. It's just a fictional character, okay? But I really admire him a lot simply because of his lack of empathy, you know? This guy, he just goes around with a mask on, a faceless William Shatner mask, you know, completely bleached out. So you know that there's somebody under that mask, but at the same time it seems like there isn't, you know, because Loomis, who was his psychiatrist, his doctor, the guy who studied him, he once described Michael Myers as the embodiment of pure evil, you know? There is nothing inside of this person except evil, so he goes around killing like it's no big deal, you know? And he doesn't feel pain, because Michael Myers can take a beating and get back up and keep on trucking and kill everyone around him, you know? Even if he seemingly dies, you can shoot the guy, you can cut his limbs off, you can freaking, I don't know, even decapitate him. He always comes back somehow, you know? There was actually a really good video over on Film Theory that talked about how you could actually beat Michael Myers, and he actually described in a few instances of the video how Michael can have he has this sort of regenerative capability where you can actually cut off a limb and it'll grow right back, you know? So to me, it's a very impressive character, you know? And it does make sense, like, but as soon as you kill him, like, you should always make sure he's dead, but even then he always comes back, you know? I think it's impossible to kill Michael Myers, you know? Because, I mean, he did come from two human parents, but it's almost like he was birthed by evil itself, you know, because he just can't die. And the way that he goes around killing, his signature weapon is a butcher knife, you know, but he can kill you with his bare hands if he wants to, but of course the knife is iconic, so he goes around, what do they call it? He goes around, damn it. He goes around just killing everyone with his knife and doesn't really feel anything, you know? So the way that he does this is very, very admirable to me, because he just does the business, man. He doesn't care about anything else, you know? Very rarely do you see instances in the movies where he actually seems to stop and think about something before doing it, you know? But it's really rare. Michael Myers, to me, is the embodiment of pure evil, man. You can't beat this guy. You cannot beat this guy. You can try, but you just can't, you know? It's established that he actually has Laurie Strode, who was played by Jamie Lee Curtis in the original movies, you know? She was actually his sister to some degree, you know, even though we thought he actually killed another one of his sisters, you know? But they were actually siblings to a certain degree, you know? So the plot of the Halloween movies is always Michael having some kind of, I don't know, GPS radar locking onto her and trying to kill her, you know, to find her and kill her. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, you know? But still, that's how the story originated. So Michael Myers, to me, because of his strength, he has a pretty much he's pretty much invulnerable. He can't really get hurt, he can't die, nothing can happen to this guy. So in my opinion, Michael Myers is just the perfect example of a classic horror movie villain, you know? To me, he's the best, and the way that he does what he feels like he needs to do without even thinking about it, to me, is just, it's obviously very frightening, but at the same time very admirable. So, you know, to me, Michael Myers will always be the most, like in my opinion, in any horror movie list, he's gonna be the best villain ever. And I actually some time ago watched the 2018 Halloween movie, which actually retcons everything that happened after the first Halloween movie. So only the first movie is canon. Now we go forward 40 years into the future. But I'm gonna be reviewing that movie individually later, so just wait for that. Okay, next we're going to be talking about Jason Voorhees. You know, now Jason is a controversial figure because it took me a pretty long time to realize that he was not as iconic as we thought he was back in the day. You know, because Jason is also in the slasher genre. He uses a machete to kill his victims, and he wears a very iconic hockey mask that today we all know is very prominent within his mythology. But did you guys know that he didn't even get that hockey mask until the third movie in the franchise? You know, and also in the first movie, he didn't even kill anyone. This actually took me a while to figure out, because I always thought that Jason was like the real killer ever since the first movie, and that was actually because this is a very weird thing, because I saw the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th, you know, before watching the originals. So like I thought that it was always Jason from the get-go, you know, it was always him from the beginning, you know, killing all of these teenagers. And it took me a while to understand that in the first movie he didn't even show up at all. It was actually his mother doing all of the killing. And then somehow Apparently the story goes that Jason supposedly drowned in camp, the lake at the camp that he was staying at because the counselors were negligent, so his mom became vengeful and came in to kill all the counselors and all that, you know. And then it apparently somehow Jason survived, you know, and then not just survived, but he managed to come across the corpse of his mother in his head, so now it's an inverse. It was all reversed. Now he was the one who felt vengeance, you know, towards his mother and wanted to kill all of the counselors, you know. These people really hate camp counselors. I've never been to camp. Can't really comment on it. But anyway, so then he actually shows up in the second movie, but throughout the whole thing, he actually wears a burlap sack on his face. You know, he's killed. There are a lot of creative kills, you know. He uses the machete, uses a spear, uses, I think, a pitchfork too. I don't remember. But we actually do see his face briefly. He looks just very strange. He actually kind of looks like Michael Myers. It's actually a really weird thing. You know, back in the 80s, it was really weirdly casted, all of these characters, these actors. But anyway, so on to Jason himself. There were a lot of sequels spewed out, you know, throughout the 80s and also a few in the 90s for Friday the 13th. And Jason was established as a towering behemoth, you know. Just like Michael Myers, he didn't talk, you know, but he did have a mental problem, so I don't know. I don't really know if it's because he didn't want to or he actually couldn't, you know, he had a speech impediment or something. But Jason was built up to be this behemoth who would go around slashing at everyone with his machete. And he was actually much stronger than Michael Myers. He really had superhuman strength, you know. He could run really fast, but there's actually, once again, I am making a reference to Film Theory. I love that channel so much. Please, MatPat, sponsor me one day, man, because I only talk about your stuff on I talk about your videos more than I talk about mine. But anyway, he did a video talking about the secret powers that Jason might actually have, which is a theory that Jason can actually teleport. How exactly, nobody knows, but it's a theory because he seems to appear randomly in places that wouldn't make sense for him to appear in given where he was just a few minutes ago, you know. And he invokes fear in the characters, you know. He makes them actually run away from him, but he stalks them very slowly. And Friday the 13th is actually one of the movies, the franchises that most establish the trope, the cliche of characters tripping while they're running, you know, because you really don't trip that often while you run, right? But in horror movies, it's like they have, I don't know, they're being tripped by an invisible force or something, you know? But anyway, so there were many cliches established in the Friday the 13th movies, you know, especially the first few ones. There were many sequels. There was one where Jason even went to space because he was frozen in cryogenic sleep, and then they thawed him out and started killing everyone, you know? It's just I don't know, man, it seems like torture porn, you know. In every movie you kind of make Jason come out to be, you know, unstoppable, you know. Of course, there were a few instances where he was actually killed, but then just like Michael Myers, he always manages to come back somehow. Nobody knows why or how, but Jason also seems to be very unstoppable in his own right, you know. He does have a few different abilities, you know. He seems to be able to regenerate himself as well, the same way as Myers does. And Jason is very, very interesting because he essentially has the mind of a child because he was abandoned by his mother. Not really abandoned, but you know, he had to kind of face the world without her. He actually found her head, which probably traumatized him a little bit, you know. In the 2009 remake, they actually played around with the idea of one of the characters resembling a younger version of his mother, so he kidnaps her and kind of keeps her safe, you know, because he resembles his mom. But, you know, every movie kind of establishes a different mythology for Jason, but as far as I know, he's never been retconned the same way that Michael Myers has, you know, with Halloween H2O and a 2018 remake. But they did try to remake it in 2009. I thought it was really interesting. But, you know, I mean, that's just how it is, man, you know. And I'm gonna get to the remakes later, you know, talking about how those work. But to me, Jason is also a very insurmountable force. Somebody's knocking at the gate over there. But I honestly think that Jason deserves a lot more credit than he deserves. You know, he is pretty frightening, and he actually squared off against Freddy Krueger, who's the next one that I'm gonna talk about, you know. But I'm gonna get to that in the next segment. Okay, now let's talk about Freddy Krueger, alright? Now this one here, oh boy, this one is cool. I really like Freddy. I really do. You know, he's actually like he's one of the friendlier serial killers. You know, he's actually supernatural. He has a lot of different strengths and abilities, but his wisecracking persona always just gets me every time. And he was very elegantly played by Robert Englund in the original movies. You know, so and I mean seriously, no other actor has done that character as much justice as him. You know, honestly. But anyway, so here's the thing: Freddy Krueger is a very interesting character in that that he kills you without you even seeing him coming, you know, because he kills you in your sleep. He goes into your dreams and kills you, and then when you wake up, well, you don't actually. You don't wake up. You're completely dead. And the way that he manipulates you in the dream world is what happens to your body in the real world. So if you happen to be killed by him, you know, in the dream world, and somebody is there to see your body, they're gonna see your body being flung around like a rag doll, being sliced open and bleeding and all of that, you know. It's actually very brutal. I would go on to say that the original Friday the 13th, the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie was actually one of the bloodiest I've seen, you know, in all of these classic horror movies. And I think it's really, I don't know. I think that Freddy is actually very, very, very good at what he does, but he does exaggerate just a little bit. And the story behind Freddy is really intriguing because apparently, depending on the kind of origin story that you believe in, you know, I actually, the one that I'm most familiar with is the one in the remake in 2010, but I also do remember the one back in the 80s where apparently he was a child molester disguised as a friendly gardener or something, or a school teacher, and he would actually abuse the kids, you know. And then when their parents found out about it, they actually cornered him into a building and burnt him, you know. They burnt the building down, and then he died, you know, by he was burned alive, so that's why he's all, you know, burnt and scarred and all of that, you know. And now, where the finger knives came from, I don't know. You know, it seems like he fashioned them himself, you know, in the wherever netherworld he was thriving in. And then he comes back and starts invading the kids' dreams when they're much older now, when they're teenagers, and starts killing them. Which I think is just, you know, that's just a douchey thing to do, man. I mean, why kill the children, you know? I mean, it's like, I love how this is turning into me explaining how you would enact revenge, you know? Wouldn't it make more sense for Freddy Krueger to kill the parents and not the kids? I mean, the kids didn't really do anything. They were victims. Doesn't make any sense at all. But I can understand that maybe it was just to try to get revenge on the parents through the children, you know, try to make them experience loss. But anyway, Freddy is the ultimate serial killer because you literally cannot attack this guy. You can't hurt him because he only shows up in your dreams, you know. And one more time, film theory. Matt Pat did a video talking about Freddy, you know. This entire video really should be sponsored by the film theorist, you know. I just think it's a good idea. But anyway, and explaining how it would be possible for you to actually beat Freddy Krueger, you know. Now here's the thing, staying awake there's really no way to win with Freddy Krueger, because if you go to sleep, he gets you, and if you don't go to sleep, your body gets you, you know, because you can try to drink a lot of caffeine and exercise to stay awake at night, you know, but, you know, if you go for too many days without sleep, your body is literally going to collapse in on itself, you know. A human being has to go to sleep eventually. You can't just forge sleep for the rest of your life. So sooner or later, you're going to go to sleep, and that's when Freddy's going to come for you. You really cannot escape Freddy, and he's a very patient bastard, you know. He's actually literally a bastard because he was conceived by when his mother was a nurse at a mental asylum. Go away. I really hope Freddy Krueger kills these motorcycle bastards in their sleep, man. Speaking of bastards, Freddy Krueger's mom was actually a nurse working in a mental institution, and then one day she was accidentally locked in one of the cells with, you know, hundreds of the cellmates, you know, and she was left there overnight, and she was repeatedly raped over and over and over again, you know, and throughout all of these very grotesque rapes, you know, Freddy Krueger was born. So he is actually, he is described as the bastard son of 100 criminals, you know, 100 insane patients, you know. So, I mean, he's not, you can actually understand why and how this person grows up to be what he was, you know. Now, apparently, Nancy was one of the most famous final girls who took down Freddy Krueger in the original movie back in the 80s, where she actually she intentionally went into the dream world and she took him on, and then she somehow pulled him into the real world, and that's how she got him. But of course, we're talking about a horror movie in the 80s, so of course there were countless sequels churned out, you know, that kind of retconned everything, you know. It's almost like they don't want this character to die, you know. And eventually Robert Englund stopped playing him, you know, so that's kind of what bogged down the series, because actually at a certain point, you know, the jokes, the wisecracking, they started to get a little stale, you know. It's just, I don't know, it started to get really cringy. They don't age very well. And there was a point where Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees actually went head to head in Freddy versus Jason. Now, it is a very, I'm not even gonna tell you guys who won, because I really don't want to spoil this for you, but just watch the movie, you know. It's really surprising though, the one who emerges the victor. And We're talking about a behemoth who doesn't feel pain, doesn't speak, you know, his only goal is to be a remorseless killing machine against a killer who is actually, you know, much more cunning, much more stylish, you know, and wisecracking. And the story goes that Freddy is trying to kill kids, you know, when they're asleep, and then he wants to invoke fear in them so they can be more afraid. So he brings in Jason, but then Jason starts killing everyone, and then Freddy gets pissed, like, hey, you're taking my victims, man, that's not cool. So then they actually have to battle, they have to have a showdown to see who's actually superior. So it was really cool, man. It was really cool.
You really shouldn't fall asleep in class.
Alright, now let's get into the very last contender. He's the last, but he's definitely not the least, although he is the one who I know the least about. You know, that's not a coincidence. I'm going to be talking about Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, the original movie was very disturbing. That's the first thing I want to say, get right off the bat. If you have never seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre back in '74, you probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't, because if you're a very squeamish person and you can't take violence, you know. And it's funny because there isn't a lot of graphic violence, like there's not too much blood, you know, compared to the other movies at least, but it's the imagery, man. You know, the imagery is just really, I don't know, it's gut-wrenching. It's really hard to watch, you know. To me, it's very, very tough to stomach, and the original movie is, you could call it special because of that, you know. They really weren't afraid to go the extra mile, and the grainy, weird, old-timey, crappy footage almost makes it look like found footage, like it's a snuff film or something, you know. But still, there were a few scenes that I can watch today and it still kind of hurts too, you know. They actually remade the Texas Chainsaw Massacre several times, you know. There was even one that had Alexandra Daddario from the Percy Jackson movies, you know. And if I'm being honest with you guys, they all kind of suck, you know. They try to go over the top with the violence, you know, the imagery, but nothing will ever surpass the original. And for me to say that, the original has to be something really special. Now, the way that Leatherface works is that apparently it's a whole family of cannibals, you know, who actually, they kill people, and then they kind of, well, they kill them to eat them, obviously, but they don't just discard their remains, you know. They actually use the skin to make furniture, you know. And Leatherface has a mask that's actually made of human skin, you know. It's really weird. His whole family also takes advantage. They use the bones to make furniture, you know, and then they eat the flesh. So, and fun fact, Leatherface was actually inspired by the real-life killer Ed Gein, you know, who was actually a grave robber who supposedly killed a few people as well, and also used their remains to do different things. He used to make furniture and silverware, you know, and a bunch of other stuff. It was really disturbing. The photos, even though they're in black and white, are really hard to stomach. But Leatherface is kind of, he's a very misunderstood fellow, the movies would establish him to be, because he's apparently related to one of the characters later on in the other movies. And there have been so many Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies that I actually can't keep track anymore, and I don't really know which ones are sequels, which ones are prequels, which ones are reboots, you know, remakes. But the point is that Leatherface is a very, very interesting fellow for the fact that he kills you with a damn chainsaw, of all things, you know. So Michael Myers has his knife, Jason Voorhees has his machete, Freddy Krueger has his knives, but you really can't beat a damn chainsaw, man. I mean, that's about as brutal as you can get, because you can use that and literally just cut people in half, you know. And Leatherface is known to pick up his victims and hang them from meat hooks, you know, and then cut them in half and freaking, ugh. It's weird, man. It's a literal slaughterhouse of people, you know. It's very hard to watch, you know. And one of the reasons that I can't really watch slasher movies is because of the graphic violence, you know. But I am curious, so sometimes I will try to watch one or another just to have an opinion about them, you know, even though I'm not a fan. I have not watched every single movie in these franchises that I talked about, but the first ones I did, you know, the first ones I saw, just to have a little basis on fact here. So Leatherface, to me, the way that he wields his chainsaw, because a chainsaw is heavy, and he obviously has a lot of upper body strength, because he wields that thing like it's a freaking pillow or something, you know. It's really not hard, even with one hand sometimes. So you can't really beat that kind of thing, you know. Now, I don't really know too much about the character, his motives, you know, his basis in reality, and what exactly drove him to kill, but I do imagine that it's because he wants to provide for him and his very disturbing family, you know. I don't even know who's worse, them or the Manson family, dude, because damn, they freaking eat people. But anyway, so I do think that Leatherface can also be up there with the greats, you know, because he is very iconic. And when you hear Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you immediately think of scenes from the original movie, you know, and Leatherface. So I do think that he is very synonymous with horror culture as well, you know. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of him and I don't have too much information to offer, I still think that the way he does what he does is very let's say, impressive, just out of fear so he doesn't cut me up at night, you know, and just the raw brutality, you know, because everybody else, every other killer just kills for, you know, random reasons. Michael Myers has no reason, you know, he just goes around killing. Jason does it for revenge, so does Freddy, you know, and to toy with them, but Leatherface does it to eat, man. He kills you and cuts you up into tiny pieces and eats your flesh. He uses your bones and your skin to make things for decorations. He wears your face on his, you know. You just can't beat this guy. Dude is freaking psychotic. So of course Leatherface will make it onto this list as part of the big four. So, what's the final verdict here? Who do I consider to be the best? You guys might have already guessed it because I did give you who my favorite was at the beginning, but to me, the best out of all of these four is without a doubt Michael Myers. It is way too easy, man. You just can't beat the guy. You cannot beat the Shape, you know? You really can't. You guys can give your own opinions about the other characters. They do have their qualities, their flaws, you know, but I mean, Freddy can go into your dreams. Jason has a lot of superhuman strength, and Leatherface will freaking kill you and eat you and use your bones to make it a chair, you know? But Michael Myers, the way that he has no remorse at all, you know, he does not have a reason to kill, you know. All of these other characters have reasons. Michael Myers does not. He does not care. He does not feel anything. He just kills and kills and kills, you know. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't drink. He doesn't die. He doesn't get hurt, you know. Apparently he does age because it does show him 40 years later. He's actually much older now, you know, but still, eventually Michael Myers might actually pass away from old age or something, you know. That might be the only way to kill him, you know, or expose him to some kind of deadly radiation that's going to take away his powers, you know, like in that video by Film Theory. But he is still unstoppable, you know, and he is the one character who there have still been movies of, you know, as of recently, you know. In 2018 they did the Halloween, you know, 40 years later thing, you know, so there haven't been any other horror movies that I know of with all the characters that I mentioned. So Michael Myers to me is enduring simply because he's pure evil, you know. Now, I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this, you know, so feel free to leave a few comments below, especially what you guys thought about the old movies and the remakes, you know. There was a remake of Halloween that I forgot to talk about earlier. It was actually in 2007. It was directed by Rob Zombie. It was actually pretty nice. It was interesting, but it kind of took the series in a different direction. It showed you a little bit of Michael's home life when he was younger, how his family was broken, and then he actually snapped and killed everyone, you know. And then there was another sequel a few years later, you know, but it sucked. Halloween 2 to me was just, there was more violence than story, so it really sucked, you know. You guys know about the remakes of Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street in 2009, 2010. Texas Chainsaw Massacre had a remake too, and I watched it with Alexandra. Didn't really like it too much. It wasn't as brutal as the original, but I did like the other remakes, you know. I think that I'm usually against remakes, but when you try to remake a horror movie, it's different because you can use today's more modern CGI and visual storytelling to make it much more visceral and brutal. So I actually enjoyed all of the horror movie remakes that I saw, except for Poltergeist. Screw Poltergeist. But anyway, that's it, guys, okay? Shout out in the comments below, let me know what you think, and if you like this video, subscribe to get more content every week, and hit the notification bell so you can know exactly when I post a video. Sometimes I post 1 per day, sometimes 2 per day. Over the weekends, it's 4 videos, baby, you know, 2 every day. So I hope you guys enjoy my consistency. This is Chazzy, signing out for now. Beware, lock your doors at night, and I'll see you guys in the next video.